The year is 1957, and these first pictures will be of a 1957 hunting trip to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and the town of Champion is where we were based. This is one of the scenic views we had on the way back up into the Huron Mountains, where our hunting area was located. This was another scenic view along the grade road which we had to take to get back up into the mountains. Those clouds are full of snow, and believe me, we got it. Another view along the grade road. Well, that's a shot of my 1956 Ford station wagon parked along one of the grade roads in the Huron Mountains. It looks like we had snow and more snow. That snow there is just about knee deep. As I recall, the snow was so deep that the deer weren't moving, and we had a hard time trying to find them. Well, we had some pretty scenery to look at and shoot anyway. Well, that homely-looking character standing at the side of the road is yours truly. Easier walking along the road back to the car than through all the snow knee-deep. Well, here we are back at the car. It's noontime and time to eat. The gentleman on the left here is Harry Prisk, whose camp we were staying at in Champion. The fellow on the right is Mason Garrett from Indianapolis here. These two young ladies here were Harry Prisk, our guide's two daughters. And they helped fix the meals and prepare our lunches for us back at the home base. I can't remember their names at this time. Here again, these is Harry's two daughters taken in their living room in the house. We didn't stay in the house. We had a log cabin or a cottage out beside the house that we stayed in. Room enough for 4. This is the little cabin that we stayed in while we were guests there at Harry Prisk's place. As you can see, we had plenty of snow. This is another shot of the cabin we stayed in. As you can see, the outside needed a little sprucing up. However, the inside was cozy and warm and really comfortable. This was a small hunter's cabin that we found up in the Huron Mountains during one of our days hunting up in there. And as you can see, the tracks leading into it were pretty deep. A beautiful setting. Well, you can get an idea here of the work we had to do every morning to clean the cars off to get ready to head back up into the mountains. This concludes the hunting trip of 1957 up to Harry Prisk in Champion, Michigan. No deer that year, but a lot of fun. Another year has rolled around. It's 1958 now. Now, this is a front view of our new home that we had just moved into at 1724 Ellen Drive. The rooms were a little bit larger than what we had on MacArthur Lane, so we thought it would be a wise change. Another front view from the opposite side. Those two front trees in the front yard there are small. You ought to see what they are now. This shot is similar to the first shot, other than that you can see the two-car garage in the back there. We've made a number of changes in the home since we moved in. Added a front porch, put a den in the back. Now, this is in the front room looking out towards the street. Not much furniture, as you can tell. We just not quite settled in yet. These next 8 or 9 slides were flower pictures taken up at Holcomb Gardens up by Butler University. As you can see, it was in the spring and the tulips were in bloom. These are my 3 sons at Holcomb Garden. On the left, Denny, Mark, and Ricky. The year 1958. This is another variety of tulips that were growing in Holcomb Gardens. Don't know the names of them, but they were pretty. This is little Mark taking a smell of I believe that's a dogwood tree in bloom, a pink dogwood. The year 1958. This is a view of some of the row flowers they had in bloom up there. Big green expansions of green grass in between the rows of flowers. This is a shot of Ricky and Mark squatting down there in front of some of the beautiful flowers that were in Holcomb Gardens. This is part of my family there behind the flowers. Mim holding Mark and Ricky at her side. I think Denny was off looking at some other flowers at this time. These were some of the flowers up around the shelter house in Holcomb Gardens. We were members of the Marion County Fish and Game Association just west of Speedway, and they were putting on a class for teaching young boys how to shoot .22 rifle. So this spring we were out on the range there, and they're getting their instructions and how to be careful and just what to do and what to expect. These are some of the boys on the 50-yard range getting their instructions, ready to take aim at the target and fire. The second little boy right there is Denny. This next several pictures were taken at Aunt Gus and Uncle Bert's home, 45 South Gladstone, in their backyard. This was Aunt Gus, Uncle Lee, and his second wife, Lorraine. These next few pictures were pictures taken at a Sunday school picnic and outing one Sunday. I can't remember where the picnic was held, but I can give you the names of some of the people that were there. This gentleman on the far left, I don't recognize. This is Charlie Eversole, Miriam Hammer, Armetta Ray, and Bill Ray. Well, it looks like we have the blanket all spread out and the picnic basket ready and getting ready to eat a bite. This lady is Mary Eversole, Charlie Eversole's wife, who was in the first picture. And this is Mark and Miriam. The year, 1958. Here we are down at the creek side. A lot of the kids are in waiting, and some of them are still up on the bank. This little boy is Ronnie Ray. That's his mother, Armetta Ray. Mark, our youngest son, and Miriam. These were some of the mothers sitting around while the kids were playing in the creek and playing games. I can't really identify any of them at this time, but we had a good crowd that Sunday. And this is what the children were doing while the mothers were sitting around talking. The kids were in the creek splashing each other and wading around and just having a ball. And here are some more of the children coming to join in the fun and wade and splash. Would you believe it? We finally got them quiet enough and standing still long enough for them to take a group picture. This is a pleasing scene. Kind of puts you in the memory of that down by the old mill stream. Well, there's our family, taking a walk through the woods on one of the trails. That's Denny, Mim, Ricky, and there's little Mark. The year was 1958. This next group of pictures are mainly family pictures taken at Mom and Dad Hammer's home, Christmas, and around that time of the year. That's Linda Hammer, Carolyn's little daughter. That's Carolyn. And there's Mim. This was taken in the side yard of Mom and Dad's house on Lyndhurst Drive, the year 1958. This was in the side yard of Mom and Dad's home. Looks like they're getting ready to grill out, getting ready to eat. On the left is Ermel Jones, Mom Hammer, Denny, and Miriam. Well, it looks like Dad was trying to get the side yard all spruced up too. There he is riding his lawnmower. He enjoyed riding that. Sure did beat pushing the old lawnmower. You might know, after all that strenuous work, Dad finally pooped out. He had to take a nap in one of the lounge chairs in the side yard. And this pretty young lady was Charlene Eversole, our next-door neighbor's daughter. She was very pretty when she was a young girl and still is. This was taken in Mom and Dad's side yard. These were some friends of ours. The gentleman there used to go to work with me at Allison's, and that's Mr. and Mrs. Minchover. They live on 18th Street and Cunningham Drive. Looks like we're getting ready for another cookout here in one of the state parks. That's Mark, Ricky, Mim, Denny, and that looks like Steve Nyman. Denny, the boy's cousin. The year was 1958. Here it is, fall of 1958, and we have a few trees in color. You'd think all the Hammer family wants to do is eat. Well, that's a good part of it, and we enjoy doing it. It looks like we're getting ready to have a meal now over at our home on Ellen Drive. This is at our home. And here we are, all seated, ready to be served. Reading around the table, that's Mrs. Bennett, Carolyn's mother. There's Carolyn and Don, yours truly, Miriam the host, Dad Hammer, Grandma Hammer, and little Mark. The rest of the family was seated out in the kitchen. They're hungry also. That is Brad, Ricky, Linda, and Denny. Well, we're all seated now, Mom. It's time you can start serving. Boy, how time flies. Here it is, Christmas again, 1958. And this is our Christmas tree and some of our presents under the tree at 1724 Ellen Drive, the year 1958. And here are some of the presents that were under the Christmas tree that year. Looks like old Santa's there waving to us. And there's our three sons sitting under the Christmas tree looking at some of the packages that we had put out ahead of time, ready to go to bed so old Santa Claus can come. This was Christmas Eve. They're all full of anticipation. Is old Santa going to come? And will he bring us some nice presents? Did old Santa come? Boy, I'll say he did. Look at the toys he left. The boys will sure be surprised in the morning. the boys were surprised, all right. And they're standing there now looking, contemplating, which one do I want to open first? The year was 1958, Christmas. By golly, it looks as if old Santa left Grandma Hammer sitting under the Christmas tree also. That's my mother, Christmas of 1958. We're going to back up a little bit here in the year 1958. We've already celebrated Christmas, but we're going back and show some other fall scenes and some of the color. This was our backyard at 1724 Ellen Drive, and that's Mark standing there in the backyard under the big shade tree. Well, there again, there's Mark standing under a yellow maple tree in bloom at Grandma and Grandpa Hammer's house on Lyndhurst Drive. This was taken from the side yard on the south side of Mom and Dad's house. Thought that pretty maple tree was a good shot. These next three pictures were pictures taken out around Dandy Trail on the west side of Speedway. The year 1958. This was a scene along 21st Street, or Wall Street Pike, as it was known back in those days, west of Speedway and west of Eagle Creek. These next pictures were taken out at Marion County Fish and Game, west of Speedway on Crawfordsville Road. We're back in the field now, and the gentleman there is practicing trap shooting. There used to be a little lake there at Marion County Fish and Game. We used to go out there and fish, had a lot of fun. Well, that's Mark standing there by one of the boats up on shore. The year 1958. There's our fisherman out on the little lake trying to catch some fish for supper. That's my dad, Dad Hammer, Denny, and Ricky. There used to be an old log cabin standing out at Marion County Fish and Game. I don't know whether it's still there now or not. But that's my number one son, my oldest son, Denny, standing there. This picture was taken out at Marion County Fish and Game, west of Speedway and south of Crawfordsville Road. It was the spring of 1959. This is another view of Marion County Fish and Game Lake. And those people standing there in the foreground is Miriam, Mark, Denny, and Ricky. This was some of the spring foliage in bloom at Marion County Fish and Game. This was a shot of some of the wildflowers that grew in the woods around Fish and Game out there. These were some of the spring flowers, tulips that were growing in our front yard at 1724 Ellen Drive. That's Mark sitting on his tricycle there in front of some of the flowers. And this year it was 1959. This is a spring shot of our backyard at 1724 Ellen Drive, the year 1959. This is a family shot of Miriam's family. On the left, reading from left to right, is her father, Bob, her mother, Alice, her Uncle Charlie, and Aunt Augusta from Tacoma, Washington, Denny, Aunt Gus, Miriam, and Mark. And that's Mim's dad's 1958 Mercury sitting there in the front. I believe these were taken at 45 South Gladstone at Gus and Bert's home. This is a good shot of Miriam, her Uncle Charlie, and Aunt Augusta Welker taken on South Gladstone in the year of 1959. Well, this is a group shot of the whole group. Starting on the left is Charlie Welker, Mim's uncle, Mim's dad, Bob, Miriam, Mark, Denny, Miriam's mother, Alice, Ricky, Uncle Bert, Aunt Augusta Taylor, or Welker, and Aunt Augusta Taylor. We were at Aunt Gus and Uncle Bert's house on South Gladstone one Sunday afternoon for a picnic in their backyard. And reading from left to right is Uncle Bert, Mark, Denny, Aunt Gus, Miriam, Ricky, Mim's dad, Bob, Mrs. Henderson, a neighbor, and Alice, Mim's mother. And the year was 1959. And doesn't that make you hungry? That pan of fried chicken there looks good enough to eat. This was a neighborhood get-together. We were having a little picnic over at Mead's across the street from us. The gentleman on the left was Bob Thompson. The lady there I can't identify. The gentleman behind her looks like Richwine, Mr. Richwine. The gentleman at the table is Mr. Strauss, our next-door neighbor. That lady I can't identify, and that was the hostess there, Mrs. Mead. This was a gathering of the ladies at the neighborhood gathering at Mead's. The little girl in the front was Kathy Cale, our next-door neighbor. Mrs. Mayhew, Mrs. Mead's mother, I can't remember her first name, Mrs. Cale, our next-door neighbor, and I can't identify the lady there that's looking away from us. This is a picture of the gentleman at the gathering. Reading left to right is Mr. Mayhew, Clarence Mead, at whose home we were at, Gilmore, and Mr. Denny, the year 1959. This was just an overall group picture of the neighbors' outing. Another group shot of the outing. From what we can tell there, that is Mr. Mead, Mr. Strauss, Bill Gilmore, and Mrs. Strauss. The Strausses were our next-door neighbors on the south side. The year's 1959, and there are my three sons sitting in the chairs at Grandma Hammer's side yard. On the left is Denny, Mark, and Ricky. Did you ever see such a fine-looking group of young men? This is Mim standing in front of a lilac bush in Grandma Hammer and Grandpa Hammer's backyard on Lyndhurst Drive. This is Mark sitting on his tricycle in front of our house at 1724 Ellen Drive, the year 1959. This was a picture of our backyard at 1724 Ellen Drive. On the left is Denny, Mark, and Ricky, the year 1959. Well, here it is, June the 24th, 1959, and it's Ricky's birthday. If you count, there are 8 candles on the birthday cake there. That's Mim on the left serving, Ricky. Peeking around Ricky there is Jeff, or is Brad, and Mark in the right-hand corner. There's Happy Birthday to Boy again. Mim on the left serving, Carolyn behind Mim there, Ricky, 8-year-old Ricky, and Mark. After having our cake and dessert in the house, we all adjourned to the backyard for Ricky so he could open up his presents. Reading from left to right is Ricky, Mark, Linda, Miriam, Dad Hammer, Denny, Grandma Hammer, Don, Brad, Don, Chucky Thompson, Carolyn, and Chucky Thompson, the little boy on the end. Ricky couldn't wait to open the big box first. I think it had his sleeping bag in it. And Mark approaching from the right. It looks like Ricky got a new baseball glove for his birthday, and Linda was taking it all in there on the right. Another group shot, and Ricky opening up his presents. Seated on the left there, you can just see his feet, is my dad, Denny, Grandma Hammer, Uncle Don, Mark, Ricky, Carolyn, and Chucky Thompson. And the year was 1959. We had just bought this camping trailer. It's a Nimrod, fold-out camper, tent top, and the beds pull out both sides. Our first outings were up in the state of Michigan. In this trip, we were headed up the Michigan Lake coastline, and this was a roadside park along the route up there. The year was 1959. This is a different view of the roadside park. They had a nice little lake there, and that's our station wagon and camp trailer in the background there. That's Denny stooped down there beside the lake, looking across, kind of taking in the scenery. Kind of restful after a long trip in the car. This is one of the many campsites we had in Michigan that summer's vacation. This particular setup was at Traverse City. And you can see we have our trailer set up and the porch out on it with the screened-in porch and all. And that's Mim. Looks like she's standing there at the picnic table getting ready to prepare a meal. And the year was 1959. My memory serves me right, this is also at Traverse City. They had a little park there and some things that we went over to see and take in while we were there. On the left is Denny, Miriam, Mark, and Ricky. I got that backwards. Right. This was one of the attractions we were taking in, and that was an old steam locomotive on display. On the left is Ricky, Mark, Ricky, Denny, and Mark. This is a shot of the beach at Traverse City, and looked like a lot of the campers and all were taking it in. A nice, peaceful place to rest and relax. They had a pretty good beach there as far as length is concerned, and the water was ideal to get out and for the little ones to get out and play in. There's Ricky, relaxing and taking it easy on a rubber inflatable raft that we carried with us for these occasions. In the background, you can see some of them paddling back there. They had surfboard-like, and you could sit on them and paddle your way around. A lot of them out on the lake. Well, that's Mark sitting on the beach. I don't think he took to the water too much. It was a little too cool for him, but he did have a lot of fun sitting and playing in the sand. Well, that's a profile shot of Mark playing in the sand. As you can see, there were quite a few people on the beach soaking up the sun. Well, that was just a shot showing the beach and the airplane flying over. Now, there's Denny with the rubber float raft heading toward shore. Ricky and Mark. Mark looks like he's cold. He can't wait to get up there, get dried off, and sit in the sun. It looks like they're having fun there. Denny's stretched out on their float, and Mark's standing beside him, and then Ricky's out a little bit farther. He's out in a little deeper water. The fellow on the right there is on one of those surfboards. He's standing up on it, paddling his way out. Now that's Denny sitting out there in the water, and Mark beside him. Looks like Mark's getting a little bit braver with the cold water deal. Well, the boys were sure having fun up in Lake Michigan. That's little Mark standing out there at the end of the raft, and Ricky's on the raft, and then there's Denny a little farther out. I don't know what he's doing, whether he's trying to take off like an airplane or what. Well, looks like Mark's decided he wants to get on the raft too with Ricky. And then Denny in the background. He's heading out to a little deeper water. Oh, that poor rubber raft got to work out this day. All three of them on it now. Denny in the back, Mark in the middle, and Ricky in front. The year was vacation, 1959. Well, here we are, set up in another campground in Michigan, on our way up to Mackinac. You can see our trailer set up there and the dining fly out over it. Mim's getting ready for another meal. This is a little bit different view of our setup. As you can see, Mother's getting the table set and preparing a meal for 4 hungry boys. We have finally arrived at Mackinac Bridge. We're on the Michigan side, lower Michigan side at Mackinac City. That's quite a bridge, quite a feat to get that bridge across the lake. Well, this was the same view taken from the same viewpoint, only this time with a telephoto lens. That was quite a bridge. While we were camped there at Mackinac Campground, that night they gave a lecture on how the bridge was built and all of the problems they encountered. It was very interesting. This was the ferry that we were boarding, getting ready to head out towards Mackinac Island. Quite a few people boarded at this point. We had a good trip out. Very nice. Well, there's a good-looking group of tourists aboard ship. On the left is Denny, Mark, Mim, and Ricky. A beautiful day, and we're headed out to Mackinac Island. Well, they found some deckside chairs there, so they decided to sit down and watch the waves go by. As you can see, there were quite a few other people aboard also. That's Denny, Ricky, Mark, and Mim. Well, there's my family again, standing up on deck. Mark there at the hatch, which is closed and covered. Mim, Denny, and Ricky. That's a lifeboat there on the right. Good thing we didn't have to use it, though. finally making an approach to the island, Mackinac Island, and that's the Grand Hotel you see there. Quite a historical place and quite a place to visit. These next 2 or 3 slides or pictures show the approach to the island and the town that was there. There are no automobiles, cars allowed on the island. It's either horse-drawn carriage or bicycles, the only mode of transportation. We've debarked now and are on the main island of Mackinac. You can see the little park below us there and the town that lays right along the shoreline. The dock going out into the lake is the dock that we landed at. This was the horse-drawn sightseeing coach that we were riding on around the island. The driver sitting there waiting for some of the passengers to come back and get aboard. Mim stayed aboard with Mark. Mark is stretched out on the seat there with his head in her lap, sound asleep. Well, this is one of the dirt roads going around the big rock outcrop there on the island of Mackinac. You can see down at the bottom there on the road a horse-drawn surrey heading around the island. Off in the background is Lake Huron, in which Mackinac Island is located. This is a historical marker sign here on the island at the point of Fort Holmes. Fort Holmes originally was a British outpost on the island. Then it was succumbed to the American troops and was renamed Fort Holmes. These next few pictures are taken at Fort Mackinac, the main fort on the island, which was maintained by the U.S. troops. And this happens to be a guard shack with a statue of a guard inside in full dress. After we left Mackinac Island, we went up to Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan, and crossed the straits over into Sault Ste. Marie, Canada. This happened to be the Bank of Canada there in Sault Ste. Marie, and so I took a picture of it. This was a small park in Sault Ste. Marie, Canada. They had an amphitheater there. A real pleasant, interesting sight. And the boys are standing up there in the foreground. Denny, Mark, and Ricky. The year was 1959. After leaving Sault Ste. Marie, Canada, we came back to the UP Peninsula side and headed west. We ended up this day at Brimley State Park on the north shore of the UP. And this is one of the drives and campers. Well, here we are getting set up in Brimley Campground. That's our trailer there in the foreground. And we'll make camp here for a few days. Well, that's Mim standing in front of our trailer set up there. We got the add a room on to the end of the camper, and it gives us some nice storage space. Now, this is a shot of the inside of our tent trailer, showing the beds. That's a pull-out bed on the left, a similar one on the right, and a hall down the middle. That's Denny laying up on the bed. Mark in the background, and Ricky sitting in the doorway here. Dinner time. We're sitting around the picnic table there, filling our tummies up. Danny in the foreground, Mim, Ricky sitting over there beside Mim someplace. And maybe that isn't. Well, that's Mark on the right. Same place, same time, around the picnic table. Danny, Mim, Mark, and Ricky. That hanging in the background there is a jungle hammock. The boys used to like to string that up between a couple of trees and take turns sleeping in it. Had mosquito netting all the way around and a rain fly over the top. These next 5 or 6 pictures will be of Brimley's beach along the water there. That's Mark in the left foreground. The rest of the pictures will be of the beach, sunsets, and all, so there will be probably no commentary on those. The 2 silhouettes standing there happen to be Mark on the left and Ricky on the right, there by the canoe. In our travels across the UP, we run across this lighthouse. As my memory serves me, this had a plaque out in front stating that it was located on the 33rd parallel. I can't remember the exact location, but that's the best my memory does at this time. After leaving Brimley, we headed back east to Mackinac and headed south then through Michigan. And this was a little way south of the Sioux at a lake called Burt Lake. We enjoyed camping at Burt Lake. In fact, we camped there 2 or 3 different times. And this was our setup at Burt Lake. The playground equipment was located on the shoreline of Burt Lake, and the kids had a lot of fun playing around on them. The little boy there in the lower left is Mark, beginning his climb. The campground at Burt Lake was fairly large, and a lot of people, the campers, would bring their boats and play around on the lake. You can see some of the boats at anchor out there, and that's Mark standing in the foreground. Immediately behind our campsite at Burt Lake was a hill, and on top of this hill was a statue, a monument of the crucifix. And the cross was made out of one giant redwood, 55 feet tall, and the arms were 25 feet wide, and it weighed 14 tons. The hill is block, concrete, and steel, covered with grass. And the figure of Christ was made of bronze, weighing 7 tons. Well, this is a picture of Christ and the crucifix on top of the hill behind Burt Lake Campground. Quite a picturesque site, and a lot of people paid homage and visited this site. This was a close-up telephoto shot of Christ on the cross, on the redwood cross and the bronze statue of Christ, which weighed 7 tons. This is a straight-on shot of the crucifix, taken from a little further distance to give you a little better perspective of the hill and the statuary. This is a view taken from the bottom of the statue at the top of the hill, looking over the Burt Lake campsite and out into Burt Lake and the far shore. This is Mark on the left and Ricky. They've made him a dam there and encapsulated a little bit of water there, making their own lake. Burt Lake Campground, the year 1959. Looks like their progress has expanded a little bit. Mark looking at Ricky, and Ricky's making some castles back up on shore. I believe that's Miriam laying on the shore up there between Mark and Rick. After leaving Burt Lake, we headed down the Michigan shoreline, heading south, and one of our favorite campsites was Interlaken, and that's where this camp setup is located. Interlaken is a music camp, and we have a lot of students come up there from all over the country to attend music camp during the summer. We had music in the morning, during the day, and at night. A wonderful place to camp. Seated there is Ricky, Mim, Mark, and Denny standing beside the trailer. As you've probably guessed by now, after watching a number of these pictures slide by you, our favorite part of camping is eating. Here we are at it again. Ricky on the left, Mark, and Mim. This was also at Interlaken, the year 1959. Good old Interlaken campground, our setup there. On the left is Ricky, Denny, Mark, and Mim in the background by the picnic table, and our 1956 Ford station wagon sitting there. The year 1959. Here it is, August the 30th, Mark's birthday. He was 4 years old. And on the left there, I believe that was Miriam holding the bicycle there for some reason or other. Mark with his little wrecker car, Dad in the chair, and Ricky sitting there. Mark's busy opening up some of his birthday presents there on the floor, and that's my dad sitting in the lounge chair behind. This picture was taken at her home at 1724 Ellen Drive, the year 1959. And it looks like Mark got him some roller skates there. Wonder how many bruises and bumps he got after that. Now, that's Dad sitting in the background, and Ricky in his tool shirt that Mim made for him. In fact, she made him for all of the boys and myself. And that's Miriam on the right. It looks like it's candle blowing out and cake cutting time. We're in the dining room now of her home on Ellen Drive, and reading from left to right will be Bradley Hammer, Denny, Carolyn, Don, Miriam, Mark, whose birthday we're celebrating, Dad Hammer. No, I beg your pardon, that's Bert Taylor, Augusta Taylor, my mom, and my dad. It looks like Mark was needing some help to blow out the candles. Brad on the left looks like he's all puckered up to blow. Gus on the right, she's also puckered up to blow. And that's Miriam on Mark's left, Uncle Mark, Uncle Bert, Mother Hammer, Dad Hammer, Ricky, and Linda. Mark had to take his bicycle out on the back walk and try it out. I think he really liked that bicycle. And that dog was Coco, our pet. We had him for 17 years. That's quite old for a dog. Christmas Eve, the year 1959. Several presents already under the tree, and Denny silhouetted on the left, and Mark silhouetted on the right. By golly, it looks like old Sandy has been here. Left a array of presents under the tree and a couple of bicycles. One for Ricky and one for Denny. Christmas morning. Mark looking at some of his toys and Ricky also. Denny's probably outside trying out his bicycle. Well, that's Mim and yours truly sitting there looking at a couple of presents we got in exchange. The year, Christmas 1959. There's the three boys helping Mim unpack a box of china that we had gotten for Christmas. On the left is Mark, Miriam, Denny, and Ricky. The year 1959, Christmas. Looks like Mark was enjoying some of the Christmas balls that were hanging on the Christmas tree that year. This is a picture of my dad and mom. Dad looks rather bad there. He had had his first stroke and wasn't really fully recovered at this time. The year was 1959. This Christmas scene was taken at Mom and Dad's house, 2021 North Lyndhurst Drive. That's Dad sitting there in the chair on the left. He doesn't look very happy or very good there. He wasn't feeling that well. And Mark kneeling beside the tree on the right. That's Dad Hammer sitting in the lounge chair there, and Uncle Otto sitting on the piano bench. Uncle Otto was Mother's sister, Mary's husband. They were here to help celebrate Christmas with us this year. The statuary on the top of the piano are angels of a nativity scene that Mom had made. And believe it or not, we still have those figures and all to this day. What did I tell you before? We love to eat. That's Mom in her kitchen, checking on the big turkey and the pan of dressing there. We're getting ready to eat Christmas dinner. Well, it looks like we have the Hammer clan all seated around the Christmas dining table now, ready for the turkey and dressing and all the good food that goes with it. Reading from left to right is Miriam, Mrs. Bennett, Carolyn's mother, Aunt Mary, Uncle Otto, Linda, Denny, my dad, my mother, Carolyn, Brad, Ricky, Don, and Mark. The year was 1959, Christmas. Would somebody please pass that turkey around again? That's Dad, Mom, Carolyn, and Bradley, all enjoying a Christmas feast. Well, here comes that turkey platter again. Uncle Otto's holding it there, and reading from left to right is Miriam, Mrs. Bennett, Aunt Mary, Uncle Otto, Linda, and Denny. Well, that's a good picture of my Uncle Otto and Aunt Mary. They had moved to Florida and lived down there for a number of years before both of them passed away. The year was 1959. A group shot there. Denny and Ricky sitting on the floor. Dad, Mom, Aunt Mary, and Uncle Otto, and Miriam standing in the background in front of the Christmas tree. Looks like Mark might be standing there by Mim. Kind of hard to see. Well, it looks like old Sandy had been there at Grandma and Grandpa's house for Christmas. This was before any of the packages were opened, and that's Mom and Dad. Dad has had his first stroke and is a little bit under the weather. The year here is 1959, and this will conclude the pictures of that year.